Welcome to Man in America, a voice of reason in a world gone mad. I'm your host, Seth Holehouse. Governments are reaching for the emergency toolkit again. Remote work, travel limits, fuel restrictions, behavioral management dressed up as civic duty. Australia, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Laos, Vietnam, one after another, governments have ordered their workers home, they've rationing fuel, and they're discouraging travel, not because of a virus, but because of the oil shock that's triggered by the conflict in the Middle East. So, different crisis, same governance instinct. And that should make you ask the bigger question. When does a temporary emergency response stop being temporary? Because that's the pattern. That's what we keep watching. One crisis justifies the measures build the infrastructure, and the infrastructure doesn't retire when the crisis does. It waits, it gets repurposed, it gets upgraded. COVID wasn't just a health event, it was a turning point, a stress test for how far governments, global institutions, and digital systems could push surveillance, compliance, and centralized authority, and how much people would accept when they were frightened enough. So people who studied all this said it very clearly. It's naive to think that a big, successful health tracking system will just be taken apart once the pandemic is over. And they're right. So in September of last year, the new WHO rules went into effect that include digital health certificates and apply to almost every country on Earth. So the control systems that were built during COVID didn't vanish. At the global level, they were cleaned up and written into rules and then made official. Now, here in the United States, some parts of the government are actually shutting down certain CDC tracking systems. Now, at first glance, that might look like things are going back to normal. But if you zoom out, you see something else happening this time. A global treaty-based system is being built above all of this. The rules, the technology, and the data channels are being set up to be permanent, to last beyond this crisis and the next one and the one after that. So ask yourself, why would you build a permanent system to manage a temporary problem? So in this interview, John Fleetwood, an investigative writer who focuses on the pandemic policy and biosecurity, breaks that question down. Lockdown, logic, emergency powers, right? The bird flu warnings are already being seeded in the news cycle, and scientists are not just being quiet about it. So in January 2026 of this year, virologists warned that a bird flu could spark a human pandemic. Institute Pasteur researchers said that it could be worse than COVID. The preparedness infrastructure is already being positioned. So what do we need to know? This isn't just a conversation about COVID. It's not about the bird flu. It's about the reusable governance model running underneath both of them, the one that uses a crisis to expand surveillance, centralize authority, and normalize control. And why right now, as we watch it being run again under a completely different pretext, it's exactly this time that we have to be understanding it. So I hope you enjoy this interview with John. I hope it's very helpful for you. Before we jump into that, just a quick reminder to make sure you're subscribed on whatever platform you're watching. Hit that like button, leave a comment. I do read most of the comments. I really appreciate your comments. And let's just dive in. John Fleetwood, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Seth. It's an honor.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. It is to have you here. It's an honor as well. And so let's just start just at one of the kind of the origins of this overall conversation. You've got a Substack. Actually, I'll pull it up. And this is how I first became familiar with you. And your Substack is just at johnfleetwood.com. And John without an H is Jon. And this is what I think is amazing in what's happening right now is this isn't some big news website. This is Substack, and you are just an independent journalist. You're not some guy that's, with some, Harvard degree in journalism and everything. You're just a guy in America that is trying to put the pieces together and share that with your fellow Americans. And I think I really want to highlight the importance of that because like what you're doing, I guess actually what I'm doing too, this is citizen journalism. And I think this is the number one way we fight this war that we're in right now is just by searching relentlessly for the truth and trying our best to get to as many people as possible because I think it is an information war. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, like my degrees are in theology and, I've worked in the church for a long time. And when I was in seminary, it was right after Trump got elected. and we had a class on ecclesiology. So ecclesiology is supposed to be about the church. We're supposed to be learning about the church, the ecclesia, for what did that look like in the Old Testament, the New Testament. Well, right after Trump got elected, my professor, it's a PhD at a Christian university, really, really popular
This is
one.
2016, 2017, right? Timeline.
Yes, yes. So just like right, it was like a day or two right after he got elected, and I had my ecclesiology course, and my professor had us put our desks in a circle, like when we were kids in grade school, so that we could air our grievances that this, racist, homophobe, xenophobe, bigot, all the, Hillary Clinton stump speech stuff had just gotten elected. And, students were like crying in class. And I thought, you know what? I need to find some sort of way to 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 bridge the gap here, and maybe try to reach my professor a little bit, or at least try to figure out, how he thinks, because I'd been researching Marxism at the time. That's what I was, focusing writing on because of the horrors of it. Um, and I asked my professor, "Hey, can I talk to you after class?" And he said, "Yeah, you go ahead and walk with me." So I'm walking with him, and I said, "Professor, I'm so thankful that you are so, politically adept. It's really cool that you are." And he said, "Well, he's like, John, I don't know what you mean." I said, "Well, you had us put our desks in a circle, and you're talking about how, this racist, homophobe, xenophobe, it's a Hillary Clinton stump speech. You obviously watch her speeches because that's literally what she says." He said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And he was dead serious. And I sort of stopped in my tracks, and my hair stands up right now, even thinking about it, because I realized that he really did have no idea. This was a PhD, purportedly Christian professor at a top Christian seminary in the United States, in California. And he had no idea that he had been indoctrinated by this cultural Marxism, where everything Western is evil. If it's white, it's evil. If it's male, it's evil. If it's heterosexual, it's evil. If it's Christian, it's evil. If it's conservative in any way, it's evil. It's once you see that, you understand the cultural Marxism and how that came from the Frankfurt School, out of Marx and Engels. It was just uh, the sort of classical Marxism, rich versus poor narrative, converted into cultural terms. It's no longer just if you're rich and you're part of the bourgeoisie, you're evil. Bourgeoisie got converted into your, if you're a Western male, especially,
Well,
like
the
you are
middle
evil.
class was too strong in America for that. They couldn't create that rich versus poor, so they had to get into identity politics instead.
Precisely. And they had to sneak it into the universities. They had to sneak it into even the Christian universities. And I'm sitting there realizing this, because I'm reading, who was it? Andrew Breitbart, Righteous
Oh yeah, good book,
Righteous
Righteous
Indignation.
Indignation. Yeah,
And so while I'm reading that, and I'm talking to my professor, and I'm realizing our Christian institutions, like, these should be the last Alamo of protecting conservative Christian Western ideals, and even that had been taken over. So I realized, as a Christian, like, I'm leading worship at the time and I'm preaching, I'm realizing, my goodness, like, the Christian church has no idea that it has been overtaken by cultural Marxism, which has led to the death of, Norman Geisler, says in his work, but before he passed away, that, you could argue, he argued, it was over 1 billion people had been injured or killed by, Mao Zedong in China, Pol Pot in Indochina, Ceausescu, you name it, Mussolini, Hitler, even National Socialist Party. Anywhere socialism and Marxism go, Stalin, my goodness, the Holodomor, millions and millions of people, of Christians specifically,
exactly.
targeted
Christians,
and killed.
specifically white Christians, by and large, in that.
Yes, and we had no idea. So I realized at that time that I had to start getting into, politics, and so I started a website. It was called OC Conservative, and, a little nonprofit out there called American Faith got a hold of me. They just started. That's how I sort of cut my teeth as a managing editor and really getting into news. But really, Seth, I see what's going on in the world with BlackRock and the World Economic Forum, and Bill Gates and the elites, and this globalist system is it's happening under our noses. It's right in front of us, but it's hidden, and it's couched behind this sort of air of the scientific community. If it's the scientific consensus, then it's going to be pushed on us. That's how the pandemic got started. The WHO called it, and then that started all the pandemic measures, the lockdown measures, the masking, the social distancing, the vaccinations, all of things which have turned out to be really bad for us. And it's happening to people because really, Seth, I, I feel like we're all being bullied into this authoritarianism, and with a cudgel of science. So that's why I focus on going through PubMed, finding the peer-reviewed literature that and criticizing it and pointing out its flaws, and then pointing out the peer-reviewed literature that counters what the mainstream position is.
Oh, I'm glad that you mentioned some of those things, because I've been reflecting on this a lot lately, and I would argue, if I was to ask you what is the world's largest religion, what do you think it would be?
Right. I would assume Christianity is the largest, or maybe Islam.
So I
Those would
would
be my
argue
guesses.
the world's largest religion is science. And I actually think that they've turned it into a religion where you even have your different levels of degrees and like your different levels of understanding. But then actually people are
Yes.
taught to believe science as if it's a faith. It's like to believe
Yes.
it just because it is. Like if you look at the tenets of like what is a religion, it's like you have a text that is centrally studied, oftentimes based upon the words of a central person that may have enlightened to, or or kind of brought forth that kind of message from heaven, right? In terms of religions
Yes.
globally, and
Yes.
people are then they study the text and they believe it, but actually, if you look for so many people, and it's kind of it's hard to ask certain people, they might be offended by it, but it's like, where does your faith lie? And it's like they believe more in science than in God and than in heaven, right?
Yes.
And they're really controlled by it. And it's almost as if what's happened, I think, in modern society versus the old society, it's almost as if in the old society, the divine was what was real, and you use that to understand the world around you. But here in modern science and these things that we can see and touch, that's what's real. And you use that to understand the divine. And I think it's been a massive kind of, I think, very intentional flip to get people to be controlled by science. Because my wife and I love historical documentaries and historical dramas and historical books and novels and whatnot. And you can see, like, looking at how people acted. And of course, this is portrayed through, film and everything, but you can see how they acted towards the world before they had this systematic science. And if something happened, whether they were, say, a Viking Dane, they'd say, "Oh, it's as the gods willed it," or say they were
Right.
a Christian, right, or a Saxon, they would say that's God's will, right? But now it's like, well, that happened because of this, because of science. Anyway, just an interesting thought I have been thinking about. I mean, literally in the past couple of days, that as you're talking, it's like, oh, this is just. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, coming from your background in theology.
Yeah, it's a scientism, isn't it?
Yeah.
And as Christians, we believe Ecclesiastes when it says that God has written eternity on our hearts. And I think it was Pascal who called it a God-shaped hole. We all have a God-shaped hole in our heart, and we try to fill it with all kinds of things. And I think you're right. I think that is probably the main religion right now is a sort of scientism. At least it's being broadcast by the mainstream establishment as being the most important thing. That's the thing we have to bow down to, and that's why I focus so much on trying to pick it apart on their level. Like for example, I've been using the government's BLAST tool, where you can align different genomes and kind of analyze things genetically. Well, I found out that the PCR test that they use to detect both COVID and influenza right now on the CDC's website, you can actually get the genetic sequences of the primers and the probes that they use to use in the PCR tests. And as it turns out, these primers and probes match human genetics. And the reason that's significant is because what these PCR tests, what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to find, obviously, like a long piece of genetic code. And so they have these things called primers and probes. There's 2 primers and 1 probe, and they each have one part of that genetic target sequence that they're going for in a sample. And all 3 of those pieces have to latch on to the same genetic molecule in the right order. Well, they're mirror images. They're supposed to be mirror images of the genetics that they're supposed to be detecting. And then if those primers and probes bind to these molecules, then it fluoresces and you get a positive PCR test. And PCR tests are how you declare things like pandemics. They're how you say, okay, we have to social distance now. We have to lock down now. We have to do all these authoritarian dystopian things. So case numbers are really important to focus on, especially how they get those case numbers, PCR test. And those primers and probes, if you put the genetic sequence of one of the like the forward primer, for example, it's only like 15 or 20 nucleotides, G's, A's, C, T. If you plug that into the BLAST tool and you say, hey, does this match any human genetics? You'll get hundreds of hits between not just the forward primer, the reverse primer, and the probe. And so when we get a positive test, are we just detecting human genetics? Are these probes and primers just binding to the human genetic material in these samples? And then if you dig into it further, you find out, and you call that a false positive. Well, there's something like 97% false positives rates for the PCR test, according to peer review. 97% at the time, when you take a positive PCR test and you grab the sample that positive PCR test came from, and then you try to culture it, you can't get a viral culture. That's 97% of the time. So in other words, only 3% of the time when they take the sample that they got this allegedly positive PCR test, when you take that and you culture it and you try to grow more virus from it, you can't find any virus there. So they call that a false positive. The PCR test, registered as a positive. Oh yeah, we found virus here. But when you try to culture it, 97% of the time, there's no virus there. So there's something like a 97% false positive rate. Well, it's like, wait a minute. If case numbers is how we get pandemics and how we get lockdowns and all the countermeasures that we're supposed to take in the vaccines, I mean, if you're calling into question the whole thing. Like, did they declare a COVID pandemic and push these deadly vaccines on us just because of false positives? I mean, these are the questions that most journalists, the average journalist at CNN or Fox News, isn't going to be looking into these things. Number one, because they're mainstream, but number two, because it's kind of hard. How do you use BLAST? How do you use these genetic alignment tools, and how do you test the primer genetics against human genetics? Most people don't know how to do this. But ever since seeing what I saw in seminary, and then seeing the cultural Marxism take over, and the World Health Organization and BlackRock and all these structures that seem so set against us, I took it upon myself to figure out how to do those things and figure out how to read the peer-reviewed literature, to show that there's another side of the story here.
Ladies and gentlemen, our world is being poisoned. Every day we're exposed to more chemicals sprayed into our skies, leaching into our food, and polluting our air and water. From pesticides and heavy metals to hormone disruptors and synthetic additives, these toxins are bombarding our bodies and silently destroying our health. But there's something you can do to fight back, and it starts in your gut. Kimchi 1 from Bright Core Nutrition contains over 900 strains of beneficial probiotics that will help flush toxins, restore gut balance, and support your immune system. Because when your gut is strong, your body can resist. You'll feel the difference. Better digestion, more energy, clearer thinking, stronger immunity, and even improvements in your skin, hair, and metabolism. And this isn't just hype. Studies show that fermented foods like kimchi can reduce the risk of obesity, improve blood sugar, and support whole body wellness. Kimchi One is all natural, non-GMO, dairy-free, gluten-free, and 100% made in the USA by a company that actually cares about your health. And today, you can get an exclusive offer just for my viewers, 25% off with your code MANINAMERICA by clicking the link below. Or call my friends at Brightcore for up to 50% off your order and free shipping. So give them a call now at 888-575-6488, and their educated staff will make sure that Kimchi One is right for you. Again, that's 888-575-6488. All the links and information are in the description below. It's really interesting piecing this all together as I'm listening to you and talking and thinking about how this is being used, right? How this, whether it's the PCR test, the fear of a virus, et cetera. And something I've been reflecting on a lot lately, and what I want to really focus a lot more on it with the Man in America show, is understanding, how did America get to where it is right now? Like really looking at what was life like in the 50s and what is life like now, and what changes happen. And there's a lot of changes that happen, whether it's the 60s movements or there's so many things that happened. But what I'm seeing as I'm piecing this together is that it's obvious that the pandemic was a tool to bring in a new level of control. And
yes,
whether that was intentional or whether it was accidental is kind of doesn't really matter as much, because it happened, right? And so people became, the idea of being forced to wear a mask or forced to social distance or forced to take a vaccine to keep your job, these became normalized amidst that pandemic. But it's interesting tying that to what we're talking about, the religion of science, because if you subscribe to the idea that we're being led into a technocratic society, that we're being led into some sort of, an end goal of some sort of kind of centralized global system that's really built off of technology. Well, technology and science go hand in hand. And if you want to take a people, whether it's the American people or the people around the world, and you want to rule them by technology, I think you first have to get them to worship technology, and you have to get them to subscribe to technology. I think that you also have to get them to make technology and science their God that they will listen to. And I think that's what we're seeing here, is because let's just say that they tried ruling out the pandemic in the 50s, hypothetically, right? The same thing. You might have a lot of these people that were just saying, well, in my Bible it says this. I'm not going to be doing this, right? I'm not going to listen to some scientists. Like I'm going to listen to my preacher. And at that time, the preachers would have been saying, "There's no way you're going to stop our church service on a Sunday, right? There's no way you would have had any churches in the 50s shutting down their services or forcing masks or forcing people to have a vaccine passport to attend church, right? So I think that it's a long-term plan to get people to first, I think, to place science at the center of their belief system, because then through that science, they could then talk about things like PCR tests and transmission rates and all these things that would actually make people very fearful of the unknown, of the virus, whether it was a virus or not. And there's a lot of debate on that, right? But it almost doesn't matter, because people were scared of it as if it was an axe murder at their front door for a lot of people. And so, that I think also brings us into, I think, a core topic that we can kind of get into in the show today, which is what's coming next. Because, it's like we saw the pandemic. We saw what it did to our society. We saw the wealth transfer, the splintering of families, the amount of fear and propaganda and everything, like what it did, not to mention the mass injections of this so-called vaccine. We also saw that, our current President Trump, at that time when he was president, was pretty involved in making these things happen, right? Whether it's through Operation Warp Speed or, a lot of the lockdowns, even though he did push it to the state level, he didn't necessarily on day 3 fire Fauci and stop the vaccine program. I mean, and so, and if you look at a lot of what's happening right now under the Trump administration, let alone what happens under the next, say, Pete Buttigieg or Gavin Newsom or whoever gets in after Trump, right? And based upon trends we're seeing, it probably won't be a Republican. There's a lot of concern about what comes next, because I think it was a very effective tool for social engineering and bringing in new levels of control. And I think that's a central part to what I've seen you really focusing on in your writing is really trying to help people understand that just because the pandemic is over and a lot of people woke up to it, it doesn't mean that they don't have plans for another one. In fact, according to what you're going to be telling us about, almost everything points to the fact that there is another one coming. So I'll let you kind of start with wherever you want to on this.
Yeah, and I'm so glad we have people like you who are unafraid and willing to talk about these things. I couch whenever I think about these things. First thing I go to is sort of a 30,000 foot view where I think about the last 100 years or so. The United States government, unfortunately, has uh, released what you can call bioweapons, biochemical weapons on U.S. citizens. You can, and I'm not just talking about Tuskegee. I'm not just talking about them radiating patients in the hospital that Bill Clinton had to come out and do a mea culpa for, but I'm talking about things like Operation LAC, where in the last century the U.S. military, with I believe it was Stanford, one of the Ivy League universities that we're supposed to respect, sprayed zinc cadmium sulfide over Americans without them knowing, without informed consent. That later came out, has its own Wikipedia page. Operation Sea Spray over in California and San Francisco, where the U.S. government again released a bacteria called Serratia marcescens over citizens without their consent, without them knowing, in a fog of all things, and that led to deaths, various infections. You have over on the East Coast in New York, you had Operation Big City, where they did the same thing. They released pathogens. They put them inside of a glass light bulb and then and then broke the glass light bulb in the subway system and released pathogens. You've got FDA, Commissioner Marty McCary now saying that he believes that Lyme disease came out of Plum Island in New York from a U.S. bioweapons laboratory. Unfortunately, I don't enjoy this, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. The U.S. has a long history, unfortunately, of harming its own citizens with different things that you could call bioweapons. And the U.S. Many portions of the U.S. government, from the White House to Congress, the Select Subcommittee on Coronavirus, to the Department of Energy, to the CIA, to the FBI, to German intelligence, all say that the COVID pandemic came from a laboratory. This was a pathogen that was engineered in a laboratory. Now, whether you think that was a full virus or just the spike protein or whatever it is, maybe it's something other than what they're telling us it was. The government's been doing this for a long time, and it's like if you know somebody who has if somebody hits you, you're in a relationship and somebody punches you in the face when they get mad at you, and they say sorry, you forgive them, you move on. A couple months later they do it again. A couple of months later you do it again. Eventually you realize, okay, this is a problem that this person has. I probably shouldn't be around them anymore if they've been harming me. That's unfortunately the situation we have with the U.S. government of them performing these experiments on the human population. Where are we going now? It looks like it will be a bird flu pandemic. And the reason I say that is because you have guys like ex-CDC director Robert Redfield. He has said the next pandemic will be bird flu. It'll have something like a 50% kill rate. He's been saying that for a long time. You have the COVID czar who was the COVID czar over in Britain. I believe his name is John Bell, I believe. He said the same thing. It'll be a bird flu pandemic. We have gain of function research off the charts right now. If you go into PubMed and put in quote marks H5N1 and hit enter, you can see there's been a massive spike. Or avian influenza, hit enter, and you'll see there's been a massive spike in gain of function research specifically on bird flu pathogens, the hemagglutinin, the neuraminidase, these proteins in the bird flu pathogen. They've been enhancing. They call it reverse genetics now. Yeah, you can see there's been a nice spike there.
Yeah,
But
10,000
there,
results.
yeah, it's unbelievable, and it's all around specifically H5N1. It's a type of influenza A virus. They figured out for years they've known how to make this infectious in humans. It only takes a couple amino acids, and that's the level that they're at right now, Seth, is they know the specific amino acids that they can change that, for example, with the COVID spike protein will bind to ACE two receptors. In bird flu, it's something different. It's called alpha 2/6. That's the human receptor that the bird flu pathogen binds to. But they've been figuring out, they know how to do this. They've known how to do it for a long time. The specific genetic changes they have to alter in these pathogens to make them infect humans, while simultaneously they're uh, building the countermeasures for bird flu pandemic, namely vaccines. And this is many types of platforms. It's not just mRNA, but it's SA, self-assembling or self-replicating mRNA vaccine platform. There's also a BPL platform, beta propiolactone, is the type of vaccine, style that the U.S. government right now is creating for their bird flu platform called Next Generation Gold Standard. This was under the Trump administration. $500 million, Seth, $500 million that the U.S. government is spending on creating bird flu vaccines, not chikungunya vaccines, not monkeypox vaccines, not measles vaccines. This is $500 million for next generation vaccines specifically for bird flu.
And just a reminder for people, this is under Trump and RFK Jr. This isn't Biden,
yes.
Harris, and his band of people, right? This is under the current
Yes.
administration.
Yes.
Trump, RFK Jr. This is being rolled out.
That's right. And RFK, you remember when he put the kibosh on all those different mRNA projects, the ones he didn't put the kibosh on all of them, and the ones that he allowed to go through were specifically, bird flu, uh, mRNA vaccines. But there's still all kinds of problems with this, even this BPL, because you can tell, Seth, they're trying to get away. We don't want to push the mRNA stuff anymore because everybody sees the problems with that. It's so obvious now. Even, mainstream reports now are saying how bad this stuff is. So, we're going to use this BPL technology. Well, beta propiolactone, it's a known carcinogen. It's actually categorized as a carcinogen by U.S. regulators, and it's even worse over in Europe. So it's a known carcinogen. Tobenberger, who is Fauci 2.0, he's Dr. Jeffrey Tobenberger. He's the head of NIAID. So he took Fauci's spot. Unfortunately, the head of NIAID now, he has a patent for BPL vaccines for the very technology that's going to this $500 million project. And Tobenberger, as head of NIAID, not only holds a patent for BPL technology at the center of the Trump administration's bird flu vaccines, as NIAID head, he also gets to okay how much of our tax dollars are going to gain of function research. And he is right now directing millions and millions and millions of dollars specifically to bird flu pathogen gain of function. So there you go. You got USDA, Iowa State University lab engineer new chimeric bird flu viruses that bind to human breast tissue. And this is out of it. And this is what I do, Seth. I just list the journal. This isn't stuff we're making up or stuff we're guessing. This is what they're telling us. They're souping up these pathogens. And I have hundreds of these articles where I take, these aren't old publications from journals from 2023 or 2022. These are brand new every single day. I've made a job out of going on to PubMed and finding the latest articles that are coming out from top journals that are respected in the mainstream that confirm we are right now souping up bird flu pathogens so that they are more pathogenic, cause more disease, can infect humans. unfortunately, that's the direction we're going. The omnibus bill a few years back allocated $1 billion with a B for a coming zoonotic, which means it's going to jump from animals to humans, which is what they predict bird flu will do. Coming bird flu pandemic. Australia's done the same thing. They've pumped $1 billion into influenza. Canada is stockpiling right now vaccines for bird flu. They're various manufacturers are building brand new facilities. You got the World Health for creating bird flu vaccines. You've got the World Health Organization doing one project after another to try to get the reins early on for a coming bird flu pandemic. So if there's going to be one, Seth, I think it will be bird flu.
Well, here's just another example of one of the WHO initiatives. This is over in Egypt. WHO deploys national pandemic influenza surveillance grid in Egypt. And that's like all the like national pandemic influenza surveillance grid. Like that's nightmare fuel right there. So you can see though that this stuff is being rolled out. It hasn't stopped. I think that there were a lot of people that had hope that 2025 would be the year of ending a lot of these initiatives of Trump ending and exposing the truth about this stuff and making sure that this isn't going to happen again. But what we're seeing, though, is unfortunately we're seeing the opposite. We're seeing, as you mentioned, huge budgetary allocation towards these things. We're seeing a continued push from President Trump to acknowledge the success of Operation Warp Speed, continuing to, even though there's been a couple of small tweets here and there that make you think maybe they're going to start opening a little of stuff, but we haven't seen any indication. We're seeing Bill Gates and Albert Bourla sitting side by side at the dinner table with Trump. So you can see the writing on the wall. Now, there's another article I want to pull up that I think is worth mentioning here because it was this one right here. I'll read a little bit about this, but I'd love to have you explain this more because problem reaction solution, and we talked about how the COVID pandemic it brought in a whole new level of the surveillance state and gained, in a lot of ways you couldn't say necessarily gain acceptance from the public, but people in a lot of ways they did accept it, but they became used to it, became much more normalized. And so you look at what this is right here, the WHO Gates blueprint for global digital ID, AI-driven surveillance, and lifelong vaccine tracking for every person. You can see how those three things go hand in hand, right? Global digital ID, AI-driven surveillance, and lifelong vaccine tracking. And this is, you can see that right there are the pillars of a system. So here, I'll read just the first paragraph. I'd love to have you help to kind of further this information for us. So it says in a document published in the October Bulletin of the World Health Organization and funded by the Gates Foundation, the World Health Organization is proposing a globally interoperable digital identity infrastructure that permanently tracks every individual's vaccination status from birth. The dystopian proposal raises far more than privacy and autonomy concerns. It establishes the architecture for government overreach, cross-domain profiling, AI-driven behavioral targeting, conditional access to services, and a globally interoperable surveillance grid tracking individuals. And so if you look at this, but also you look at Trump's coziness with big tech, with people like Larry Ellison, who has talked about using AI to surveil and how AI will be able to respond faster than the police, and then getting into AI developed vaccines. But then you start looking at that and you look at a lot of the government initiatives for data centers and the development of AI, whether it's Project Stargate, Gemini, or Genesis, right? You're looking at all these different initiatives to really build a massive digital AI infrastructure. You take that and you pair that together with the looming H1N1, the idea of that, kind of virus, both the development of the vaccines for it, but also the research and gain of function. You start to see a picture emerging here that I think is really important to bring attention to. And that's, I know, what you're committing a lot of your time to, and I think hopefully we can do with this discussion today.
Yeah, and I don't want to give anybody the wrong picture like I'm, like I have Trump derangement syndrome or anything like that. I mean, I voted for the guy both times, of course, but nobody's coming to save us.
Yeah.
Seth, the remember when they were talking about the black box warning that they were thinking about putting
Oh yeah.
on
Yeah.
the vaccines? Well, apparently that recommendation came from within the FDA. You had Marty McCary on some show, something Nation. I can never remember the name of the show, but I saw a clip where he was explaining that it actually came from within the FDA. This wasn't like some, anti-vaxxer who, John Fleetwood wrote us a letter where he thinks, they need to put a black box. It wasn't like that. It actually came from like within the agency, and they still didn't go along with it. So unfortunately, no one's coming to save us. And and if you go on to VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, or just go to openvaers.com, they list 40,000 deaths have been linked to the COVID vaccine. And then you add to that the Dr. Lazarus report that was commissioned by Health and Human Services. This was an HHS commission report that confirmed that less than 1% of vaccine adverse events, including deaths, are even reported to VAERS in the first place. Less than 1%. So that means you have to take whatever numbers they give us from VAERS and multiply it by 100, and now you're getting a more accurate number. So if you've got 40,000, you put 2 zeros after that, now you're at something like 4 million. You're telling me there have potentially been 4 million deaths linked to the COVID jab? Well, if you believe HHS commission documents done in collaboration with Harvard Pilgrim, then yes. And still, something so easy, and it would be so easy for Trump to, it's such an easy win. Like, put a black box warning on it. You'll get so many people like me, and the people who are skeptical and so-called vaccine people. You'll get so many of them back into your tribe, because again, this isn't TDS. I'm just speaking truth here. I voted for him twice, but Trump, we're talking about the World Health Organization right now. Trump's CDC and FDA are actively participating, and that's a direct quote from government documents, in WHO, specifically bird flu seminars. And this is despite, people always come to me and say, well, he signed an executive order. Yeah, I cite it for you, and I give you links to the executive order in the articles. The executive order did say, hey, we need to pull out from the WHO completely. Nevertheless, after that executive order, you've still got the CDC and the FDA actively participating with the World Health Organization, specifically for bird flu. So no one's coming to save us. We have to be coming at these things on a grassroots level. We have to be talking about it, which is, again, why I'm so thankful for you and your show, Seth. But yeah, what they're doing with the World Health Organization, this sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Like blueprint for global digital ID, AI-driven surveillance, lifelong vaccine tracking for every person. It sounds like I'm making it up. It sounds like an Alex Jones fever dream, but everything is in quote marks. That's my job. I don't have to be hyperbolic. Looking at these things, you have to know where to find the documents, but you don't have to be hyperbolic. My headlines are always directly from quotes from the studies or from the World Health Organization documents that we're looking at. So when you hear stuff like that, automated cradle to grave traceability for, I put it in quotes, identifying and targeting the people that they call, unreached or unreachable. It's a dystopian, it's dystopian globalism where they want to dissolve borders. There's no more national sovereignty. There's no more individual sovereignty. It's every country gets run by these unelected elites at the World Health Organization or at the World Economic Forum. I didn't vote for them. You didn't vote for them. Nevertheless, they are directing the policy that our governments go along with. And unfortunately, the Trump administration in some ways is going along with it too.
Well, here, and I really appreciate that about your work, is that you go directly to the source. And that's, I think it's really important, actually. And it's something that is difficult because sometimes you can't find the source, but you can paint the picture, have to draw conclusions. And I think whenever possible, that we should always just look to what they have told us. And actually, you have linked
Yes.
on your um, that article post. This is the actual. This is on. I think this is on PubMed. This is on the NIH.gov. This PDF called "Digital Transformation and the Immunization Agenda 2030." So just looking at just this first paragraph here, right? It says, "Digital transformation is the intentional, systematic implementation of integrated digital applications that change how governments plan, execute, measure, and monitor programs. This transformation can accelerate progress towards the Immunization Agenda 2030, which that's an interesting term. We're used to Agenda 2030, but Immunization Agenda 2030, which aims to ensure, look at this, this is insane, which aims to ensure that everyone, everywhere, at every age, fully benefits from vaccines. Here we describe how digital transformation can help achieve equitable immunization outcomes and outline recommendations for governments and global partners to ensure that children in low and middle income countries benefit fairly." I mean, it's crazy the words they use, even how make sure that everyone benefits from vaccines, but it's also, what does that mean to say that everyone, everywhere, every age? You can see that, I mean, read between the lines, this is the agenda to vaccinate every single person on Earth and then to trace it, right? So here they say,
Yep.
digital transformation can facilitate a child's journey to full immunization. Personalized alerts and reminders improve parents' knowledge and awareness and help them plan and prepare for visits. At point of service, electronic immunization registries, electronic child health records, and geospatial mapping of both services and communities help health workers understand which children are missing vaccines or timely vaccination and where outreach is needed. I mean, obviously because they're so good at using the words that sound very altruistic and very high-minded, but if you interpret it more literally, it's almost like what they're saying here is that they have this massive digital database, right? So the electronic records, they have geospatial mapping of both services and communities. Wait, so what's that mean, the geospatial mapping of a community? Does that mean that they're tracking the location of every person, right? To help the health workers, right? What is a health worker? Are these the people that are working for the UN? I mean, understand which children are missing vaccines or timely vaccination and where outreach is needed. It's like, are they going to be mapping like everyone's vaccine status, everyone's location, knowing who needs a vaccine and who doesn't, but then figuring out where the quote unquote outreach is needed? What does that mean? They're going to be coming to your home to say, "Hey, look, your 6-year-old kid isn't up to date on his vaccine." I mean,
Yep.
it seems like that's what this is telling us. I mean, am I being too conspiratorial to draw these conclusions? I mean, what do you think?
It's so funny because we're even looking at the document and we're asking these questions, right? Like it's their documents, like they are saying it. But yeah, and they couch it in these terms of equitability or social justice, or they're kind of walking away from that term now, or now it's, pandemic preparedness. And they say it's, to help the little people. That's why we're doing it. When they've been doing this for years and years and years, and they've helped nobody. It's as bad as it sounds, and it's worse because they couch it in those terms. They try to make it sound like it's a philanthropic endeavor, but then you just read it. You don't even have to read between the lines. You read it, and you find out, oh, they're trying to do, birth registration, digital ID, and lifelong tracking. They're trying to link your vaccine records to income, your ethnicity, your religion, social programs. They're doing conditioning access to schooling, travel, and services on digital vaccine proof. They're using digital systems to prevent what they call wasting vaccine on already immune children. AI systems to target specific individuals, identify who they call unreached, and combat misinformation. They'd probably say, Seth, what you're putting out, what we're putting out right now is somehow misinformation, even though we're showing them the documents. And that is scary that they're, what are they considering to be the unreached? Is this just somebody who doesn't want a vaccine? And what does it mean that you're targeting them? And how far does this go? Where's the line? They want surveillance expansion into everyday interactions. They want behavior shaping through alerts. They want reminders and social monitoring. They want it's in their own words, they want a digital transformation. It's a unique opportunity to address many long-standing challenges in immunization, which just means people don't want to take their vaccines. So it is really, it is terrifying. Truth, Seth, as you know, truth is stranger than fiction. You're going to be hard pressed to find a Netflix show that goes this far and goes this dystopian. But here you have it. The WHO themselves saying in their own documents, this is what we're doing right now. They're full steam ahead.
And so looking at all this, and again, this isn't just a doom and gloom fear campaign of this is what's coming. It's the next pandemic and we're all doomed. They're rolling out digital IDs and this isn't about that. Obviously, we're trying to make people aware of the plans, but I also think it's really important to understand what can we do. And just focusing here on America, which I think was the majority of our audience is, what can people do about this? And it's an important question that is not often really explored appropriately, especially when you're balancing it out with such heavy and more doom and gloom information of like, okay, we're unveiling the diabolical plans to do this, but real world applications, right? So for me, for you, for people living in America that see this, that are aware of this, like what can we do? How can we stop this? How can we avoid it? How can we keep our kids safe? What thoughts do you have on that?
Well, number one, it's going to be listening to people like you, Seth, and the information that you put out, because this unfortunately is not going to be put out by the mainstream. So you have to start listening to non-mainstream voices, getting on platforms like, any platform where you can find independent voices who are covering this sort of information, and then obviously broadcasting that information in everyday conversations, sharing it online, sharing it with friends, sharing it with family. I always encourage people to start talking to their local representatives. Find out who their state representative is, find out who their state senator is for their state and the representative for their district. Inform them of these things, because a lot of times they don't know that this is happening. I talked to a representative, a senator, actually, a state senator here in Tennessee, who I have a relationship with, and he was totally unaware of a lot of these basic problems with, for example, the mRNA vaccines, the myocarditis, how many deaths have been linked to it, how many injuries have been linked to it, what is a plasmid, what is DNA integration, had no idea. And you can't blame him, because again, where's he going to get the information? He's going to go to the news. And a lot of people don't know that all the mainstream news organizations, they're all owned by BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, and they're all going to be towing the same line. So they need to be educated, and it doesn't need to be in a mean way at all, but just talk to them, strike up a conversation, and explain, hey, I found this out about the vaccine. Did you know this? Or any other topic. But yeah, it's contacting local representatives, because that's what the World Health Organization hates the most, and the World Economic Forum and these globalists, they hate the most. And if you think about it, it makes sense, because they want top-down control, where they're at the top over everybody else. Well, what they really don't like is when we on a grassroots level come and then put these bills forward as states, asserting our sovereignty. Louisiana, for example, they have a great bill that says, hey, if the World Health Organization says we need to do anything for a coming pandemic, we're going to have nothing to do with that. A really fantastic bill. We need more like that for each state. So a lot of these local representatives and senators on a state level, they simply just don't know these things. And so I always encourage people to reach out and talk to your local representatives about these things.
And what about on the immediate community level? it actually, I'll kind of input one of my ideas that I've been thinking about lately. I think it's really important for people to build local communities of like-minded people, right? So it's like if you and I were neighbors hypothetically, and we knew that, hey, okay, I know that John lives about 5 miles away, and I say, hey, John, let's like have a local meetup, once every 2 weeks or something, and start building out, and maybe it's just us, and we each invite a few friends of ours, and then like, that kind of builds and builds. So imagine if after a year, we've got a local group of 300 people that are
Yes.
all in tune, and like spread this information locally, because then what happens if, let's just say that your neighbor has a kid, and say someone shows up at his door, a health worker shows up and says, hey, our records show that your 8-year-old isn't up to vaccine status or whatever, and we have a way of kind of putting the message out locally. Imagine if an hour later we've got 60 people showing up in the front yard, right? Not with pitchforks and guns, but showing up and saying, look, we don't support this. Right. And maybe one of
Yes.
the friends is on the local police force, and he comes in and he becomes part of it. I think that's the other thing too, is I think that we have to, there's certainly that top down, and especially looking at your kind of local politician level, as you talked about, talking to your local, politicians, your representatives, because you're right. A lot of them don't know this stuff, and educating them is really important. But I also think that at the more, just at that pure grassroots level, building these communities of people that are like-minded, that will come and support, because that's what it may come down to in the future, right? Like, what happens if, say, for instance, your local, you say you're in a small town, and the one main local grocery store is going to cave in and have a really kind of firm mask mandate, for the bird flu pandemic, right? Well, what if 300 people show up without wearing masks and all go shopping all at once together? Right? Or if you put a little thing, say, hey,
Mhm.
we're all going to do our grocery shopping every Thursday at 9 a.m. No one's going to wear a mask. What are they going to do if 60 people from the local community show up and refuse to wear a mask to come in and do business? Right? Like, it's like, we have to amplify our voices. I think that's the number one thing that is feared by the powers that be, is our ability to come together, regardless of our religion, our race, our political affiliations, but to come together on the core principles of freedom and personal sovereignty.
That is a fantastic idea, and I think people might be thinking like, how in the world could I do that? Um, because a lot of people have these thoughts and they think these things, but they don't really say them out loud for fear of being rejected socially. So they think, I know these people are out here, and I feel strongly about this, but how do I do it? Here's one easy way. You can start a social media channel like Instagram or Twitter, and keep it dedicated to a specific idea, whether it's freedom or whether it has to do with vaccines or pandemics or viruses or whatever the issue is. Just pick it and start posting. I did that when I started looking up into the sky and seeing these trails coming out of planes and wondering, what's going on here? I never, used to never paid any attention to this before, but I'm seeing it now. And is there a problem here? I started a faceless Instagram account where I would just post pictures of the planes I would see flying overhead. I would use this flight tracking radar to figure out where, what kind of plane is this? Is this commercial? Is this military? What kind of jet is this? And I would just start posting that. Hey, this is what I saw in the sky. Here's what the radar says. And I met probably about, I don't know, maybe 24 people who live in this area. And this where I am right now, and where I started this account here in just south of Nashville in Tennessee. I'm originally from California, so we moved out here. So I already left all my family and friends that I had in California. My core group, and I started fresh out here. Just doing that channel, I met probably about 24 like-minded people who I talk with now. So that's one easy way. If you don't have anybody who you can say, these are my people who I'm close with, here's a group of 200 or 300 people I can call and say, hey, get down here. If the World Health Organization and Bill Gates start banging on my front door, start a channel, start posting, and you'll find people in your area. It's a good way to start.
No, it's a good point. So I've got a book coming out called Prep Like Noah. And it's kind of
Cool.
just like a really a guide on with a more kind of like faith-based perspective on preparedness and looking at the lessons of Noah and him preparing, right? Amidst the ridicule from everyone else and saying, it's like Noah was a conspiracy theorist until it rained, right? And everyone's like, oh my gosh, this guy was
Yeah.
right. So actually the website is buildtheark.com. So it's called the Ark Community. And all the back end's all done. I just have to finish up just a little bit of things on the website and the front end. But basically, the idea is that it's going to be a private member community where people can sign up. We're going to have, there's boards for, if you want to find someone that knows how to do solar, you can find an expert on solar there. But there's also going to be chapters. So there's chapters for every region of America where you can then create your own local chapter. Right. And we'll do like national meetups as well. But let's just say you and I live in your area and we're okay, we're in this area's chapter. You might find that you can build out, there's 500 people in your local chapter, but it's not part of Facebook. It's actually on a secure server that is private, right? So the idea is that this is part of it. I came to this conclusion as well that the most important thing to be prepared is actually just to build a local community of people that you can call upon in that time of need. So again, if people want to get on the waiting list for it, the website just buildtheark.com, and there's this little place you put your name and your email. This is what I'm thinking is, okay, how can I help people? It's like, well, okay, I reach a lot of people. Maybe I can create a platform that allows people to then come meet each other, interact with me, interact with other people, build their own communities on there, take their own local Facebook group, which is probably being very heavily monitored and tagged and tracked and everything. Bring that into a much more private area where they can then collaborate. They can have events and everything. And we're also going to have a huge library of information. We're building out a book library of potentially thousands of PDF books that we can get on there on a resource library. We're going to have tutorials and classes and courses on, water 101, how to purify water, how to raise chickens. So the idea is, trying to do this. Again, this is just a way that I'm trying to figure out how I can help, because obviously fighting the information war, like what you and I are doing, is really good, but we also have to figure out how to build more strong local communities. I think at the end of the day, that's the number one defense that we have, aside from just our own faith and our own commitment to virtue and morality, which I think is the most important. But I think that next to that, it's actually strengthening our families and our local communities. That way, when these things happen, we're not alone. Because I think a lot of people, especially that thinking the way you and I do, they might be the only one in their own little small community, right? But how can we help that person meet the other 30 people in that small town that think the same way and come together and start building that local network? So anyway, the link will be in the description, just buildtheark.com, and people can sign up to get on the waiting list for that. But anyway, a little shameless plug there because it made sense.
That's wonderful. It's what they want us dependent on them. And what you're offering is a way to become very, very, very independent. So I'm all for it. Kudos. That's a great idea.
Yeah, thank you. Well, John, as we're wrapping up, what are your final thoughts? What kind of message do you want to leave people with?
I want people to know that, unfortunately, our government has the powers that be have time and time again exposed us to pathogens and chemicals without our consent. I don't like that idea. It's not something I, wake up and think, I love thinking about this, but once I saw it, I could not unsee it. And that's why I talk about it and warn about it so much. And I encourage people to, even though it's a scary thought, to spend time thinking about it, processing it, let it become part of your worldview, and then doing something about it. Because unfortunately, our government has, especially through the PrEP Act, they have the ability to deploy medicines without our consent. It's built into the language of the PrEP Act. And unfortunately, that's how they get away with these things. And I wonder what I know, a healthy person, I heard somebody say, like, a healthy person, might have, lots of dreams, right? That I want to go do this. I want to go do this. I want to have a family. I want to get this job. A sick person only has one. They just want to be healthy. They just want to feel good. I've dealt with, health problems in my life that I've overcome, and when some that I'm still dealing with, and it just it makes life that much harder. And all you want is just to be healthy again. So to think that our government and the powers that be might be doing something that is affecting our health negatively, I think is something that we have to stand up to, is something that we have to come to terms with, and then something that we have to start getting the word out about, so that if they are doing that, we can finally stop it. So my encouragement to people is that we have power in numbers. And when we listen to people like you, Seth, and process this information and then do something with it, like with all the practical application that you're giving, and then like some of the ones that I gave, that we can do something about it, so that we can, like God set up at the beginning, he said, be fruitful and multiply to humanity, to, flourish. I think God wants us to flourish. And I think if we do those things, come to terms with them, that we can increase the flourishing here on earth.
It's a good point, man. Yeah, just flourish and have kids. Multiply.
Yes.
All right.
Absolutely.
Bring more beautiful souls in this world, raise them right, raise them true, and have them carry on the mission, carry the fire. Well, John, thank you for your time today. It's been great talking with you, and I would love to do it again. And I'll make sure that your Substack is in the description to the show. I encourage people to subscribe, to follow. You can also support John's work on there if you want to, which is really important, because you're not being funded by Pfizer ads like most of the media that dominates this nation. So yeah, John, thank you again, man. It's been really a pleasure speaking with you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Seth. Really appreciate it.
Take care and God bless, man.